Okay, so I'm making this video today to show how I use Lightroom and a lot of the functions and features that are available. Essentially just how to use the sliders, the curve tones. This is going to be strictly meant for people who don't know anything about Lightroom. Whether you've only used it a few times, or maybe you just want a little bit of a basic understanding of a lot of the sliders I use. Now, do understand I am not a professional by any means. It's only, I've only been doing this for a pretty short while. But for a lot of the people that I kind of work with hands-on, this is kind of a good way to streamline a lot of things I would already teach into a video, so we can kind of go over more of like the more advanced stuff, which if you guys like this and you like the way I teach and portray like how I do things, I will be happy to do so many more of these videos. I'm just happy to kind of help. I love getting new people into photography, and I remember how stressful and how confusing it was in the beginning, and just didn't know how to start. I got a photo, and I was like, what do I do with this? And what program do I use? So if you want to know the list of programs I use, be happy to talk about them as well, because I think about 5 or 6 of them. There's like also like the plugins that kind of go in with the Photoshop. Luminar is one I'm testing out right now. But as for right now, the image I took is one of the rappers that I did a music video for and did a lot of other photo shoots for. Great guy, Dallas Johnson. Check out his music. I'll put the link down below. Did a music video for him. That was the first video I've ever done with the music video. Took it with my Canon M50. Now, the reason why I didn't use my EOS R is because I don't want to edit a photo that was essentially way outside gear spectrum. I wanted to show that, for beginners, you can take this is a very basic photo. In fact, it's actually a bad photo, and I actually purposely chose this photo because it's very underexposed. The sky is kind of blown out, and working with darker skin tones can be very tough sometimes because you want to make sure that all your blacks right here, see how they're all crushed. So this is more of not only a tutorial on how to use Lightroom, but actually how to maybe fix a photo that's either way too bright or way too dark. So today we're going to work on underexposure. So the first thing we're going to do, you drop in your photo and you import it and you click done, move away from library and move over to develop. Now, the first thing that I like to do is just get that lighting done first. So right now we have 2 options for lighting. We have our sliders, and then we have our tone, and then we have a secondary slider that keeps the curve, but it will just kind of nudge it. So we'll kind of look at that real quick. It's a very useful tool. Word of advice: when using sliders, make sure your mouse is nice. I like to bump down the DPI on it, the sensitivity, so it's very easy to do micro adjustments, but we'll get to that in a moment. So first thing to do, let's just nudge up that exposure just a little bit. Now, what you don't want to do is go too far on the exposure for anything. So when we go too high, what's going to happen is you start kind of getting this little grainy look. Things kind of start crushing a little bit. So we actually don't want to just bump up the entire photo. So perhaps about 0.75 was just enough to kind of bring out a little bit. We're not going to touch contrast just yet. We'll work on dynamics in a little bit. Let's work on what we see as a problem. So right now the problem that I'm seeing is I got a lot of blacks here, and the skin's looking a little dark. So we're going to go ahead and work on, I usually like to work on shadows a little bit, just a slight bump on everything. You don't ever want to go too far. We want to make sure we keep our nice curves working. I'm actually going to bump up that exposure just a little bit more. There we go. So I can see the neck. It's okay if you have some blacks that are kind of crushing a little bit. It depends on the full photo what you're kind of going for. I like to kind of bring in the face. It's my main subject, so I want to make sure what I'm looking at is nice and in view. So we now the skin's looking, now the lighting's looking pretty good. So let's work on highlights now. Highlights is going to be everything in your photo that is very bright. So we'll look at it right here. So you see how I was able to bring the sky down a little bit, but it's not affecting him at all. We see a little bit on the cheekbones, a little bit on the forehead here, where your highlights are going to affect. Not too much. What I usually like to do is just bring down highlights. I always like to bring down my highlights. I don't know if I can recover the sky, but we're going to find out later. I'll show you how to do that. Now whites kind of changes essentially the exposure of all whites. I mean, that's very self-explanatory, but again, this is very basic stuff. So I'm gonna show you what it does. You know, we're going to the brightness with everything that's bright, I usually do like to have things a little bit bright. It kind of just brings a little bit of life into it. I'm a very warm and bright editor, and that's where we're going to move on over to temperature. Now I like to do a slight little bump on temperature to the warm. I'm not so often do I do kind of the cold blue looks, but once in a while at nighttime I may do like the blue and teal look. If you want to learn how to do the blue and teal, we'll get into split toning. Just ask and I'll make a video. So temperature is a very delicate meter to use. If you go too far left or right on it, you're going to mess up your image. So whether you're doing cars or skin, that's the two things that are going to really affect it the most. And at least that's in my experience. Everything that I say today in this video is only within my experience and my own opinions. There are people on YouTube that are probably a lot more better than I am, but this is where I learned everything. So I like to bump up the temperature a little bit. Now see what happens when I start going too high. You know, the skin looks very unnatural. It starts affecting the hair. Now this actually isn't too bad. I could actually probably make this work somehow. When I start going into my color grading, but you know, we don't want to go this high. So we just want to do a slight little bump. Play around with it. I mean, this doesn't go with everything. Play around with it and just look at it objectively. Like, do I like the way this looks? You know, don't worry too much about realism. Just make the image how you like it. This is your image, this is your art, this is your mind putting into it. Enjoy what you make. Okay, so I kind of like that. That's nice. So now that I got lighting done, I got temperature done, now I want to work on contrast. And again, contrast, I see this way too often where I see contrast being used way too heavily. You don't want to use contrast too much. And I'm going to show you why in a moment. Typically what I do is I actually start working on the tone curve here, but I would rather have you guys work on sliders first, and then we'll move down the tone curve. So what we're going to do is we're going to bump up contrast just a little bit. Actually, I really don't want to touch it at all, actually, because I'm starting to lose his neck again, because I took the photo underexposed. There's some data in the photo that's just very hard to recover. Now, there are ways to recover certain spots by painting, using a gradial tool. I can actually go in here. I would paint this, but we're gonna make this very simple, just very easy. We can go in there, and we got the neck back. Very simple, very quick. That's what today's video about. So, you know, again, if you're a professional or a very advanced user, it's like, oh, you should be painting it, you should be masking it. Again, this is just gonna be something very simple, very quick, something easy to use. Also, I'm wanting to take in consideration for the people who are using their phones and they have their fingers. They may not have a stylus, they may not have a tablet. A lot of the people that come to me are using phones. So again, you know, go easy on me. I'm trying to think about, you know, the simplicity of phones as well, because Lightroom is on your phone. I actually use it for a lot of photos. So moving on from that, now you see tint here. Tint is something I hardly ever touch. It typically, when my camera is tuned into Lightroom, which again, that's something we can talk about later on, my tinting is already automatically set. I don't like touching it all too often. It is very useful. As you can see, I actually got rid of a lot of the yellow and made a lot of the plantation a little bit more natural looking. Again, bring it back to green. Obviously, go too far, everything starts turning green. Purple, and again, you know, you can see you go too far. And by the way, you can double click these, and these go back to zero. Now, a lot of people like to use these two right here. I'm going to say this right now for all the beginners: please do not overuse the texture and clarity. They are very helpful and they are very good tools to have, and I use it for every single photo. But overuse of anything on Lightroom is going to essentially have the reverse effect. It's going to end up making it just very unnatural. So I'm going to go ahead and give you an example right here. So texture, what happens is what texture does is kind of highlights a lot of the bumps. So if we go in here, we're actually going to kind of bump this up a little bit more. I'm going to zoom in on his face. Dallas, I am sorry that I'm focusing so hard on your face today. I know I didn't ask permission to use your photo, but I hope you're okay with it. You look good in photos, so you are fine. So what happens is it kind of increases the contrast within the image with a lot of the lines. So right here you can see, let's see what happens here, right? We got rid of a lot of the blacks, got rid of a lot of the whites, and it kind of merged them together. Now look what happens when I bump it up. See, the blacks are a little bit more prevalent, and it looks like contrast is increased. Now there's a whole science between texture. There's a lot more to it than what I just said, but again, simplicity today. So how much texture do I want to use? You know, when I look at the photo, you know, what happens when I bring it down, right? His face is nice and smoothed out. You know, the background's nice and smooth. It looks objectively good when I bring the texture down. You know, what happens if I bring it all the way up? Okay, well now it's looking a little fried, you know, and that's what we like to call a lot of the, at least that's what the word I've used with the peers that I've met. When a photo looks kind of a little crispy, we call it fried. So I'm going to show you guys how to use this tool very well. So again, typically what I would be doing at this moment is I would be paintbrushing. I would pick my spots and I would paint his face and I would lower the texture in certain spots. But today we're going to take consideration simplicity. We actually want to keep that there. Actually, that one was a very good one that I liked. So, all right. So let's bring it on his face. And let's bring the texture down just a little bit. Okay. Now, he's a little bit smoothed out. He looks good. I know for a lot of people who do portraits, I know they like to be able to make their skin look less smooth. I mean, you look at my skin. I'm not going to edit this photo, so here I am in full glory. You know, my skin looks very, you know, you see a lot of wrinkles and stuff. I am 26 years old, by the way, so, you know, so don't join the military. No, that's only a joke. You are free to do however you like. Now, back to the photo. We smoothed out his face a little bit. We fixed the lighting. Skin looks good. We're gonna be doing a little bit more color grading in a moment here, but we're not done yet. We're only half done. So next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring the subject out more. A lot of people ask me, how do you make a car pop? How did you make the focus of the photo kind of separate from the rest of the you know, of the background and the foreground? How do you make that separation? Now I'm going to show you. This is, I mean, by no means is this a secret or my little trade skill. This is something I just kind of learned from a lot of people and then adapt my own skills to it. Today, I'm just going to show the very basic usage of it. So we're going to take the focus. The focus is going to be his face. The focus of any photo when it comes to a portrait is almost always going to be the eyes. Now, obviously, you know, there's going to be other cases. There's thousands of other ways to do portrait photos, but we're talking about the, you know, the very standard here of your subject is facing you, they're looking at the camera, the eyes are always going to be the focus. And that's one big rule you want as a photographer is when you're taking a picture of someone, make sure that their eyes are in focus and make sure that they're looking at you, or if they're not looking at you, it at least looks good. You know, sometimes I have my subjects look up and out from the camera, so they're looking, you know, they might look like this. That's okay. As long, typically my rule is I like to have the whites of the eye within the frame. So what do? There's two ways to go about this. Sometimes I use both depending on the rest of the image, which is I would invert this and darken the image. And we can do that. Or I can keep the keep the version on there and brighten up the face. Now today we're just gonna brighten it. I like the trees. I have to do some work on them. So we're actually gonna go ahead and just keep his face. Now, not a whole lot. Because we really don't want his face to look all too much of a difference with the rest of his skin. So just a little bit. But now he looks a little bit more, his face looks a little bit more, out there. It's a little bit more pop. And in these little micro adjustments, when they're all added together, it's going to make a huge difference in the photo. Each one of these by itself maybe not make a huge difference, but with everything added together, it will. Okay. So that is how we use a great radial filter. Sorry about that. And there's a lot you can do. I think we can get into sharpness, noise, more and defringe. Nothing you have to worry about yet. We can also work on clarity. What I like to do now, typically when there's I have a nice sunset, what I like to do is use my, I forgot what it's called, a graduated filter, and do that, and just do a little bit of minus clarity. Now the thing is, you're not going to see it too much, but what it does is it kind of adds a little bit of a ghost effect. Here, we'll go ahead and zoom in on it. Yeah, a little bit of a ghosting effect. It's really nice when you have a sunset. I'm going to do a photo with the sunset. If you guys really like this video and you found it helpful, we'll work on that. So we don't need that. But we are going to go over about, I did say that that will try and fix the sky. Again, proper way of doing this would be masking out the sky from the rest of the trees and so forth. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this down a little bit. The middle line is going to be where you're cut off, and then the line below that's going to be where it starts feathering. So you can control the feather. You control where your cutoff point is here. I'll even show you. You can see you got your line in the middle here, and then it starts feathering down. Use at your own discretion. So let's see what we can do here. There's not much. We kind of lost the sky completely. If you try to bring down exposure too much, what starts happening is we make the sky look very unnatural. So it's better to have a blown out sky than try to do a very forced exposed sky. I could probably make that work. Let's say I brought that down, brought the highlight down. Maybe I made it purple, right? And then we do a little bit of a, let's see here. Those nice little purple skies that we see, in Florida. If you've ever been to Florida, we have it here in New York a little bit. Increase the brightness. Yeah, I mean, there's not much you can do with it. I don't really touch the sky too much. Actually, I've only got into sky replacements. That's typically the way to go if you really want a sky. Or what you can do if you really want is try to change the color of it, of it being blown out. So you can always do that. Let's see here. Let's see what we can do. Actually, put that back. Not too much. Again, not too much. Oh, Control Z. Okay. So actually, the reason why I'm bumping it down like this is because I don't want the cloud. Clouds are very tough, so you don't want the cloud to have that definite change of pace. So there we go. It's a little bit purplish. That's the kind of look that you want to go for. Again, change the colors how you like. Very subtle, but at least it's not fully blown out. Typically what I would do is I would just do a whole entire sky replacement. Okay. So next up, we're going to talk about the tone curve. What the heck is a tone curve? So the tone curve is going to be your lighting, your exposures. And this is actually, you can actually force or induce contrast with this. So I'll show you. Make your 3 points, first, second, third. And the reason why we do that is because when you adjust it, you don't want your curve to move around too much. Control Z. So here's what happens. Oh, that's not good. Okay. You can double click it and it'll go away. So let's say I just have one point here, and you see how the entire curve moves, and we don't want that. So your 3 points. Now a lot of people have asked me, how do you get the faded look? Easy. What you do is, once you make your 3 points, you bring up your bottom point, bring it up a little bit, and you see how your blacks kind of fade a little bit. That's all it's doing. It's called a black fade. So here, we'll get a little bit closer on the blacks here. Yeah, see how we fade it. Now, I do like the look sometimes. I don't like overusing it too much. It can become quite prevalent when you do it too heavily, and you see it kind of looks like washed out. I think it's a really nice look with certain photos. Don't you overuse it too much. You know, go ahead and open yourself up to something new. It's very easy to rely on because blacks are very hard to work with. It's very easy to get them, especially with cars, to get them very crushed or have them mixed. And so what people do is they just fade the blacks. So it's a lot easier if you learn how to use your tone curve and just learn how to fade just a little bit. Bring this back down. So we are going to bring it up just a little bit. And this is why I talked about having a low sensitivity on your mouse, so you can kind of easily nudge things around. If you're on the phone app does allow you to use a tone curve. If you need a tutorial on how to use the mobile one, I can make a very quick one, just kind of show you where the settings are. But other than that, I don't need to make an editing one for it because mobile version is going to be almost the exact same as this. So why do we use the tone curve? Well, the tone curve, you're able to kind of manipulate your control points a lot more when it comes to light. So there's two ways to go about it. I can go ahead and adjust a photo just using this. As you can see right here, this is your midtones. I'll just bump that up a little bit so you can see it a little bit right here on his face. You can work on that a little bit. These are the darks, so right here you're going to start seeing the spots right here kind of brighten up a little bit. But I do like a little bit of the contrast, so I don't want to bump it too much. And these are highlights. Very subtle movements. So you don't want to move the tone curve too much. What happens is, let's say I just kind of go too crazy, your lighting starts becoming way too contrasted, and you don't want that. So that's how you use a tone curve. It's definitely a tool that you have to learn if you want to really get into editing. Play around with it, find some nice curves. There's definitely different types. We'll just keep it subtle, keep it simple. You can add a lot more if you want, and nudge them around. You can use this tool right here. I honestly, it is a saver. You can pick a spot, you control where you want to, how do you want to affect it. So that's your tone curve. Next, very helpful tool is micro adjuster. Very, very nice to use. You can kind of move this around a little bit without completely changing your curve. I don't really need making many adjustments to it. We're gonna keep it as is. Next up, we have our HSL. Very important tool. I would learn how to utilize this in almost any photo, because this is how you're going to fix a lot of your colors, change them. So immediately what I like to do is work on reds and greens and blues. And now that is your main colors in a photo, but that's why I like to work on them first. Purples, I don't care too much about. Oranges, I hardly touch. You are gonna touch yellows not too often, but it will be in your skin tones for like lighter skin portraits. So what we're gonna do is we're on Luminance, so that's gonna be your brightness for colors. Let's see. This is how I edit, and this is how almost actually anybody edits photos. Is they go around, they play around, they see how it looks. I don't like it being too bright. I'm actually going to bring it down just a little bit so I can try to even out the skin a little bit. To be honest, where it was at, I kind of like it, so I think I'm just gonna keep it where it is. The greens, I don't want the greens to be too bright because I don't want the focus to be taken away. And we'll leave it at that. You can even use this to fix the sky. And I knew this was going to happen. I knew that this was probably the one tool that was going to get me back on track. Now, the reason why I like to do the filters first is because if you look at the rest of the image, it's changing. So you have to kind of be careful with it. So I don't want to go too far with it. And that's really about it for Luminance. There's nothing else I need to touch up on. I mean, I could probably go to the hair. That's going to be your oranges. Maybe I can make the hair a little bit brighter, but it's just going to affect the skin. So a tool you definitely have to be careful with. Saturation. Saturation is a tool that everyone likes to play around with very often. I would say stay very, very far away with your saturation going past 25. Anything past 25, again, personal opinion, personal experience, it just starts looking a little too fruity. You don't want that. So let's see what happens when I bump up the saturation too far. So right now we're at 10. This looks good. Very tasteful. Let's go up to 20. Okay. The green started getting a little too high on the set. The skin starts looking a little too orange. Let's go up a little bit higher. And the hair too, right here, it's starting to look a little too unnatural. Now we're starting to get a little too much color on the brow here. Now it's starting to kind of separate colors. Just doesn't look good. Now, what is the difference between vibrance and saturation? Well, saturation affects everything in the image. Vibrance affects all the colors in your midtones. So what I actually like to do, and this is my own little personal tactic, is I actually like to bring down the saturation a little bit, just a tad, and then bring up my vibrance. Yeah, there we go. And vibrance can go very high if I'm going to bring down the saturation, because you have to remember, -7 for this can be about 31. Now I'm above the 25, but vibrance acts a little bit different. It's a little bit more subtle. If I brought up saturation to 38, let's see how that looks. Yeah, see, I start getting a little too much orange here, and then it starts kind of fading off to the yellow. So vibrance and saturation is going to act very differently. I'm also going to work on, I'm actually going to bring this down a little bit because I'm actually going to be bumping up saturation individually in different spots. So I don't want too much, but keep it nice and subtle. What happens if I bump it all the way up? Same thing happens with saturation. It just starts looking a little too fruity. But it also depends on the artist that you're like. So there is never going to be a right or wrong way, the way you want to make your art. You make your art the way you like making your art. We're now coming down to 30 minutes, so I'll try and speed this up for you guys. So now that I did my overall vibrance and saturation, now I can start bumping up the colors that I want individually. So let's work on a shirt. I like working on shirts first. There's not really too much to work with here. So if you see a saturation doesn't work too much, start doing luminance first. Yeah. Not much I can do. Now what I can do is get the brush tool or a radial filter and kind of make sure I can brighten this up a little bit. Yeah, it starts affecting my sky right here, and I don't want to work with that. So nothing I can do there. So that means I want to be very careful with everything else, because if I bump up everything else too much, I'm just gonna end up separating the colors. And I really don't want that. I want this to look kind of even. I want the lighting to look even. So do be very careful with how you use that. Now I actually want to, I'm going to try and bring down the saturation on the middle here for just the reds. Just enough to where I'm not getting too much yellow. And then what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to get a radial filter here. And I'm going to bring up saturation just a little bit. So I can try to get my colors nice and evened out there. And then we haven't touched greens yet, so let's touch the greens up a little bit. Just enough to make it look kind of nice. Alright, sorry about that. My camera battery died, and I didn't feel like plugging it in, so I'm just using all my batteries. Cannot find a plug, so I'm being lazy today. So now that I got my colors done, we're gonna go ahead and go down to the color grade wheels. Very useful if there's a certain look that you want to do for your entire photo. Sometimes I don't touch it at all. Sometimes I like to kind of nudge around with it. Two ways to go about it. We can go ahead and grab our cursor here and move it around. And what I like to do is just kind of spin it around and kind of see, how the photo looks and see what type of look I want to go for. I'm not going to do too many major adjustments to it. I want to just keep this photo, just try to keep the colors as natural as possible. For this one, just keep it nice and simple. We can go into like very dynamic color editing later on. So what I'm going to do, because I like warm looking photos, I'm going to go ahead and bring my shadows up to yellow here. And play around with saturation a little bit, see how you like it. Again, don't want to touch it too much, so I'm just going to do a little bit of a slight bump here. Cool thing is you can also adjust the luminance as well. Again, it's not something I really want to touch right now because I kind of really like how the lighting is. And I don't want my photo to look too faded, especially since we already adjusted our tone curve to fade our blacks a little bit, so we don't want to overdo it. So now that we did shadow, another way we can do about it, instead of grabbing the wheel, you can grab the sliders. So first thing I do is grab the saturation and just move the hue around. And again, nothing too crazy, but you can see, there's major, there are very noticeable adjustments. So again, we're gonna bring our main focus in and spin the wheel. So as you can see, there's certain colors that you really want to stay away from, because what's going to do is it's just gonna very emphasize a color that you just don't want. We go over green, he kind of looks a little bit sickly. Now what happens if we go to maybe blue or purple? That doesn't look too bad. How about warm colors? I think somewhere around there. That looks very good. Sometimes you might end up picking the same colors. That's okay, because again, these are affecting different grades of exposure. So it really depends on how you want your photo to look. Maybe you want to fade in. I do kind of want to bump up my midtones just a little bit. Again, just bring a little bit more life into it. Nice and bright, nice and warm. And then again, bring up the saturation on your highlights. Now this is going to be affecting my sky. Now this is a way I like to fix my sky sometimes. So again, earlier, like I said, it came out a little bit purple. Don't worry. I'm going to bring that over to blue. And there we go. We got a nice blue sky. Do I want to touch the luminance? Not so much. As you can see, bring it down. His skin starts getting affected too much, and then starts kind of losing that nice smoothness when it comes to brightness. So we're not going to touch that. Blending and balance. This is kind of how all three of these interact with each other. Again, because I did micro adjustments and the shadows and the midtones were pretty much the same color, it's not really going to affect it. So if I move blending and balance in one spot, it's going to be the same across the board. So don't worry on which one you're on. So let's see. Well, that's what happens if I do blending. If I go to the right, what it's going to do is it's going to pick the bright a little bit more. It's going to prioritize this blue here. If I bring it down to the lower end, it's going to kind of more focus on the orange yellow that I kind of picked for both of these. So let's see, what do I want? What looks good? I think just a little bit more accent on the yellow and the orange there is nice. Balance, same thing. I don't want to touch balance too much to the left, because then what happens is I start losing my sky and it goes right back to this yellowish, purplish look. I don't want that. So let's just go ahead and just do a +17 there. And I like that. Now sharpening is going to be one of those things where, again, you don't want to overdo. Just because you bring your sharpening up to 150 does not mean that your photo is going to look more sharp. And if anything, it will actually just make it a little bit more, again, the term that we used earlier, fried. We don't want it crispy. No Krispy Kreme today. See, so this is what happens when we'll go back to default here, double click for default. This is how it looked at default sharpening. And this is what happens when we bump it all the way too much. That doesn't look good. We don't want that. So what we're gonna do is find our nice little middle ground. Now when I bring it all the way down to the left, what happens is I get a little bit, it kind of blurs it out a little bit, smooths it out. In certain spots you may want that. The cool thing is if you want to smooth out some spots, there's a couple ways to go about it. You can do the noise, you can do the minus clarity, minus texture, and we'll kind of show that real quick. I'm gonna show you guys how to smooth out someone's skin. You know, and you maybe don't want as much texture. So I'm actually not going to touch sharpening too much. There's a whole entire video we can do on it, on how to properly use radius detail masking. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and just keep that default. Noise reduction. Noise reduction is going to essentially get rid of a lot of the grain, a lot of, again, the noise when you get from a photo. Now, how does a photo get noise and grain? Well, when you bump the ISO on a camera, what's going to happen is when you bump it up, you may make the photo brighter, but what happens is it's going to introduce all this noise. You see, you see all these squares and pixels looking very pixelated. That is going to be your ISO. So what we want to do is reduce all this noise here just a little bit. Now, it's also going to affect the rest of the photo, so you want to make sure that you're not bumping it too much, because look what happens when we start bumping it up. Our noise starts fading away, but now my subject is looking way too smooth, and you start losing your sharpness. And you don't want to lose your sharpness. You want to try to find that happy middle ground. Again, you can go ahead and you can paint a certain spot and feather around, mask it, and kind of control the noise from there. We're going to go ahead, keep it nice and simple. Because this photo is kind of taken at during the day, I don't really have a whole lot of noise. We're zoomed in by 400, so all this noise that you see, you're really not going to see it, on a phone screen. You blow up on maybe like on a huge TV, you'll probably be able to see it. I don't know many people who are looking at photos, my photos on a TV. Now, when it comes to noise on color, what happens is, this is the reason why people buy very expensive cameras, very expensive lenses, is because they want to try and increase a lot of the grain when it comes to color. And we're going to get into chromatic aberration in a moment here. Now what happens is, look what happens when I get rid of color noise reduction. And this is the default settings that Lightroom has. You start seeing the red, green, and blue pixels and grain all over the place. That is what happens when, with the camera. It's very natural. It's going to happen. So typically, again, just find your nice little middle ground. I like to bump it up just to the point where it disappears, because if we go too far, again, what happens is we start losing a lot of our lighting, or it starts kind of frying it up a little bit, and we don't want that. Now, again, chromatic aberration and profile correction. Chromatic aberration is going to fix a lot of, essentially it's like errored colors in photos. Again, there's a whole entire proper terminology and teachings on this. We're not going to get into it. A lot of lenses and cameras are going to have automatic settings. Right here, it already knew what camera I was using. This is called metadata. Profile correction is going to fix the distortion. Every lens that you use is going to have some type of distortion on it. Phones, what happens with phones is they already have that built in the software, so you don't have to worry about it with phones, unless you add an attachment to it. Typically what you should be doing is doing this at the very beginning. I did forget. This is the first time I'm recording for first time I'm editing. I actually did not pre-edit this photo. I didn't even practice. This is me coming at this fresh. So you guys can kind of understand the process here and kind of get the feeling of what I go through when I edit a photo. So now the photo looks a little bit more flattened. We don't have much of a curve here. You can really see it when it comes to your background, especially the foreground. You can see the grass kind of bends here, and then we fix that. Also, you get a little bit of a net here, even up here as well. Get rid of the vignettes. And that works a lot. Vignetting, I do not like using vignetting. That is a personal taste, especially when it comes to daytime photos. I don't think vignetting looks very good, but that is definitely a personal opinion. It can look good, but that is going to be your personal taste. So I mean, there's two ways to go about it. You got your brightness, you got your darkness. Again, I just don't think that looks good. It just makes my sky look very, you know, uneven, and just kind of takes the focus away. I like my photos to be very, you know, try to keep it nice and smooth and even. Split toning, that's essentially going to affect a lot of your hues and saturations when it comes to how two colors play together. And you can play around with this, see how it looks. It's going to drastically change it. There's not much I want to do to it. Once in a while, I take a look at my photo and I see, you know, is there any colors that I kind of want to make it pop out a little bit more? You know, is there a certain like color I want to go for? As you can see, you know, do I want this photo to be a little bit more greenery, or just want this to be a little bit more like fall? You know, so you know, kind of use at your own discretion, see how you like it. I am going to play around with just a little bit. The blue primary has always been the most drastic. I actually do kind of like the way the green looks. Let's play around with the green. Actually, I kind of want to see how green looks. I like that. Let's see what happens if I want to do a little bit more orange, more autumn. Yeah, I like that. We're gonna go ahead and keep that. It looks, you know, again, it looks very realistic for me. You know, because grass isn't always perfectly green and even. You know, it has a lot of like discolorment to it, faded. But this is a very helpful tool. A lot of times, I just kind of go ahead and do auto. Now, when it comes to portraits, what happens is it automatically just tries to pick something. What it actually did, it actually locked in on the horizon here, and that's kind of what it chose. What it does is most of the time is it chooses your horizon. And locks in on it and then straightens it out. We don't need to use it, but if you do use it, click auto, click constraint crop, and there you go. Reason why I don't like it is, look, I have my foreground horizon here, and it just doesn't look right. So we're gonna go ahead and just turn that off. I like the way I took the photo initially, so we don't need to touch it. So other than that, I mean, we went over, you know, we went over split toning, vignetting. Not much to talk about that. Cropping, and you know, you get a nice little tool here. You know, if you pick 2 points, you know, it kind of works with distortion and works with, you know, any type of warping, aspect ratio. This is a very useful tool if you are working with architecture. Other than that, it is not needed. Go ahead and turn that off. There's a little bit more tools. Play around with it, see how you like it. Most of the time, you won't have to make too many adjustments. Auto typically does the job for you if you're not taking a photo of anything too crazy. Went over the color wheel. We went over the HSL, went over tone curves, went over overall lighting. We went over a little bit about our sky tool. Sorry, I mean, it's not a sky tool, but mostly what I use it for is the sky. If I'm not doing sky replacements, which if you want to learn how to do sky replacements, I can make a video on that. That's something I'm currently teaching myself on Luminar. We went over radial. You know, we did actually a lot of radial filters here. Painting, real quick, I'll go over it real quick. I don't want to miss anything that may help you in the future. So let's say I want to focus on the face and I want to essentially maybe make it brighter. What I'm going to do is turn on auto masking. And if you're on Windows, what I do is control mouse wheels, control your overall size. Shift mouse wheels is going to control your feather. So what I like to do is, this is actually something that I just kind of to learn on my own, is if I want to learn where I'm painting, let me bring down that feather, bring down the size a little bit so I can get the shape of his face, is I like to either bring down the exposure, bring it down so I just know where I'm painting first. And as you can see, it's mostly just focusing on, it's kind of hitting the hair a little bit, but what it's doing is it's masking where it thinks the cutoff is. Now what happens when I turn off the auto mask, what's going to happen is it's just going to paint everything. So you can use that at your own discretion. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of all of this. There we go. So nice, very, very useful tool. I've used it constantly. A lot of you guys have asked me again, go going back to earlier about how to make an image pop. That is how, at least that's one of the ways, is to isolate a part of the photo and control the colors, the luminance of it, and see how that looks. But other than that, there we are. We have our finished photo. You know, and overall, I like the way it turns out. It probably wouldn't be a photo I would use professionally to advertise, but it's a nice Instagram photo. It's a nice Facebook, just a nice little quick post. Dallas didn't know that I was going to be making a photo, editing a photo for him. This is actually from months back, so I'm sure he'll be happy to have this. But let's go ahead and take a look at the previous here. I'm gonna do this the easy way. So here is our original, and here is our finished. I have to say I'm actually pretty happy that I was able to do this. Like I said, I did not edit this photo beforehand, so I didn't know how it was going to turn out. So I'm pretty happy that it turned out pretty nice. So if you liked the video and you have some ideas or some suggestions on what you want for me to go over, things to talk about, what camera gear to buy as a beginner. I've only been doing this for a little bit over a year. Did a little bit of photography in the Navy, but I didn't really start teaching myself a lot of the aspects only from about a year ago. So probably I've only had a camera in my hand for about 3 years, and only been heavy editing for about a year. So if you have some suggestions, have some ideas, you want some help, reach out to me. You can DM my Instagram. If you have me on Facebook, go ahead and send me a message for the people who I made this video for, and I'll go ahead and try to cover as much as I can in my free time. And I'll be happy to help out as much as I can. Give some suggestions, software. I can go over what the difference between Lightroom Classic and Lightroom Creative Cloud, and try and point you in the right direction. Other than that, my name is Kells, and thank you for watching.